About 320 million years ago, the Earth looked wildly different. Picture steamy, prehistoric jungles thick with swamps and murky wetlands. On land, giant millipedes the length of a grown man and massive scorpions with terrifying pincers crawled through the underbrush like something out of a nightmare. These beasts ruled the land, but believe it or not, the real monsters were hiding beneath the water's surface. Down in the inky depths of ancient rivers and lakes lurked predators so massive and so vicious they made even the creepiest land crawlers look tame. These weren't your average fish. We're talking about creatures the size of a car, with bone-crushing jaws and razor-sharp fangs longer than steak knives. Meet Rizodus, the freshwater apex predator that evolution designed way ahead of schedule. A beast that would have made even today's great white shark think twice. Belonging to the Rhincodontidae family, Rizodus was a type of lobe-finned fish, distant, armored ancestors of modern-day coelacanths. But this wasn't a slow bottom feeder. Rizodus was a top-tier killer that ruled the waterways for more than 30 million years. Fully grown, this aquatic monster stretched over 20 feet long, longer than a city bus, and weighed as much as 3 tons. But despite its bulk, Rizodus wasn't sluggish. Its sleek, torpedo-shaped body, narrowing toward a muscular tail, gave it both power and speed. Fins mounted toward the back helped it cut through the water with deadly precision, like an underwater missile. But its most terrifying feature? Those 10-inch-long front teeth. 2 dagger-like fangs jutted from its lower jaw, curved slightly, perfect for stabbing and holding on to anything unfortunate enough to cross its path. Behind those were rows of smaller teeth, still sharp, still deadly, each one up to 2 inches long. Rizodus didn't just strike and shred like a modern shark. No, it hunted with cold, calculated aggression. Once it sank its teeth into a victim, it would drag the struggling prey down, deep into the water or into a submerged burrow, where it could devour it without interference. Fossil evidence even suggests this predator might have been able to launch itself partially out of the water, snapping up prey right from the shoreline. Think crocodile, but supersized. And yet, as terrifying as Rizodus was, it wasn't alone in Earth's early monsters of the deep lineup. Long before Rizodus patrolled freshwater rivers, during the Devonian period, there was another nightmare from the ancient seas, Dunkleosteus. This beast was the stuff of pure primal fear, covered in armored plates and sporting a jaw built more like a guillotine than a mouth. Dunkleosteus looked and acted like a living tank. It was prehistoric terror. Back in the Devonian period, roughly 360 million years ago, the oceans were a battleground, and the undisputed heavyweight champion of those ancient waters was Dunkleosteus. This thing wasn't just a fish, it was a prehistoric war machine. Just the head alone stretched over 3 feet long, protected by thick, bony armor that looked like it had been forged for battle. Fully grown, Dunkleosteus reached lengths of 15 to 20 feet and weighed over 2,200 pounds, easily outweighing most modern sharks. Its body had a somewhat sleek profile, but don't be fooled, it wasn't built for long chases or endurance swimming. Its fins were relatively small, meaning it wasn't a sprinter, but Dunkleosteus didn't need speed. It had shock and awe on its side. When it attacked, it launched itself with one explosive lunge, enough to catch its prey completely off guard. And then came the jaws. In just 20 milliseconds, faster than the blink of an eye, Dunkleosteus could throw its jaws open, creating a vacuum-like suction that sucked its prey straight into its mouth. And in the next instant, just 50 to 60 milliseconds later, those jaws slammed shut like a bear trap. But here's the wild part. Dunkleosteus didn't have teeth, not like we think of them. Instead, it had 2 massive jaw plates lined with sharp, blade-like edges and fang-shaped points that could slice through flesh, bone, and armor like a hot knife through butter. Its bite force was no joke either, clocking in at about 5 megapascals, similar to the crushing bite of a modern American alligator. Whatever Dunkleosteus caught, it destroyed, Fast, brutal, and final. This predator was a true nightmare of the ancient seas, but the ocean had more horrors to offer, because just when you thought it couldn't get any weirder or more dangerous, along came something that looked like it swam straight out of a science fiction movie, Rhinoceros. Living about 325 million years ago, Rhinoceros was a giant cephalopod, a distant ancestor of today's squids and octopuses, but far more bizarre. It had a long, straight shell that stretched nearly 8 feet in length. Inside, the shell was divided into a series of connected chambers, like a submarine, all linked by a central tube called a siphuncle, which it used to control its buoyancy, rising and sinking through the water like a living blimp. At the front of that shell, Rhinoceros had large, alert eyes, a sharp parrot-like beak, and a forest of long, powerful tentacles ready to grab and drag anything unlucky enough to cross its path. This was a creature that commanded its environment with stealth, reach, and crushing grip, a prehistoric kraken before the legends even began. At first glance, Rhinoceros looked like something straight out of a sci-fi movie. Imagine a massive pipe-like shell with tentacles spilling out the front. But despite its alien appearance, Rhinoceros wasn't some relentless hunter. In fact, it was relatively laid back for a creature its size. Rather than chase down prey, it preferred to ambush, settling near the ocean floor and waiting for unsuspecting fish or invertebrates to wander too close. And when they did, that's when its powerful beak-like jaws snapped into action, easily crushing the hard shells of trilobites like a nutcracker cracking walnuts. But being big didn't mean being invincible. Rhinoceros, for all its size, had one major weakness. It was slow. And in ancient oceans teeming with predators, that made it vulnerable, especially to swift, heavily armored fish who saw it as just another oversized snack. Now, let's rewind the clock even further, about 450 million years back to the Ordovician period, where we meet one of Rhinoceros's far more terrifying ancestors, Endocerus. Where Rhinoceros was cautious, Endocerus was a giant apex predator, faster, bigger, and far more aggressive. Its shell stretched a jaw-dropping 26 feet long, nearly 3 times the length of Rhinoceros. Like its descendants, Endocerus used gas-filled chambers inside its shell to control its position in the water. Think of it like a prehistoric submarine with deadly intent. But what truly set Endocerus apart was how it hunted. With a cluster of muscular tentacles and a razor-sharp beak, it could grapple, rip, and consume with terrifying efficiency. It fed on anything it could overpower, from trilobites to the giant sea scorpions of the time. One of its most fearsome meals, Dakosaurus, the largest arthropod in Earth's history, growing up to 8.2 feet long. This prehistoric sea scorpion had claws like swords, but even that wasn't enough. If it crossed paths with Endocerus, chances are it ended up as lunch. With its enormous size and surprising speed, Endocerus ruled the oceans of its time like an ancient king. Fast forward 250 million years, and the legacy of giant cephalopods was carried on by another sea monster, Megateuthis. Living during the early to middle Jurassic period, Megateuthis wasn't just big, it was one of the largest belemnites ever discovered. It swam through the warm seas that once bordered what is now Europe and Asia, and it was every bit as intimidating as it sounds. Unlike today's squids, Megateuthis had some serious upgrades. Its body was supported by a solid internal skeleton forming a rigid, cone-shaped core that gave it both strength and a streamlined shape for high-speed swimming. It didn't have the long, flowing tentacles of its distant cousins. Instead, it was built like a living torpedo, designed to move fast, hit hard, and vanish before anything could strike back. It was stealthy, fast, and incredibly efficient, a perfect predator for its time. Just like its other giant cephalopod cousins, Megateuthis was a jaw-dropper when it came to size. Some of the largest specimens stretched over 10 feet long, making it one of the biggest belemnites ever to roam the ancient seas. If this beast was still around today, it would easily take 4th place among the largest cephalopods on Earth. and for any marine creature swimming nearby back then, running into Megateuthis was basically a death sentence. Its arms weren't just for show. They were lined with hundreds of razor-sharp hooks, perfect for grabbing and pinning down fish or smaller sea creatures. Then came the real nightmare, its powerful beak, which could bite down with crushing force, making quick work of its prey. But evolution wasn't done showing off. Tens of millions of years later, in the early Cretaceous period, nature continued pushing boundaries, especially in a place known as the Western Interior Seaway. This vast inland sea once split what we now call the US and Canada, creating a massive and diverse marine environment. And in those waters, new giants were born. One standout from that evolutionary surge was Tusoteuthis, a massive cephalopod that belonged to the Enchoteuthidæ family. Scientists at first weren't sure what to make of it. Some thought it was related to the giant squid, others suspected a connection to the eerie vampire squid, Vampiroteuthis infernalis. But newer research leans toward another possibility. Tusoteuthis was more closely related to octopuses. This wasn't just some drifting deep-sea oddball either. Tusoteuthis was a full-on predator, actively hunting fish, other squid-like creatures, and possibly even small marine reptiles. But as dangerous as it wasn't safe from the food chain. It often found itself being chased and eaten by even larger hunters like predatory fish and the terrifying mosasaurs, the sea's apex predators at the time. One fossil discovery tells a wild story. Scientists found the remains of a fish called Cymbospondylus with something unusual lodged in its throat, the internal skeleton of a Tusoteuthis. Apparently, the fish tried to swallow the squid tail first and choked to death in the attempt. For years, there was a lot of debate over just how big Tusoteuthis actually got. Early guesses were bold. Some claimed lengths up to 36 feet, but more recent realistic estimates bring it closer to 10 feet long. Its close cousin, Enchoteuthis, was similar in both size and style. A stealthy hunter built for stalking and striking with precision. These two giants stood among the largest mollusks of their era, but they weren't the ultimate rulers of the cephalopod world. That title belongs to a true sea monster, one that could easily be called a prehistoric kraken. Meet Cameroceras. This ancient giant ruled the Ordovician oceans like a myth brought to life. With its massive shell and overwhelming presence, Cameroceras was top of the food chain for nearly 30 million years. Not because it was fast or cunning, but because it was just too big to mess with. Based on today's best estimates, the largest Cameroceras ever discovered had a shell that stretched a jaw-dropping 36 feet long. And since its shell made up about 90% of its total body, scientists believe the full length of this ancient sea monster could have hit 39 feet, making Cameroceras the largest predator of its time. Cameroceras wasn't some alien life form either, it was a member of the Cephalopod family, the same group that includes today's octopuses, squids, and cuttlefish. This connection gives researchers a solid starting point to imagine what this giant might have looked like, how it hunted, and how it survived in the dangerous waters of the ancient world. Even with all our modern science, some prehistoric mysteries remain just that, mysteries. Take the case of the massive beaks unearthed in Japan. These fossilized remains hint at giant squids that may have dwarfed any living cephalopod today. But here's the catch. All we have are the beaks. No full skeletons, no soft tissue, just those ominous, hooked jaws. And while those beaks scream monster, without more evidence, scientists remain cautious. The size, the shape, the potential, it's all speculation. Still, one thing's for sure, these mysterious mollusks, along with the ancient predatory fish they shared the sea with, were apex predators. They ruled their ecosystems with terrifying efficiency. But like all rulers, their reign eventually ended, because lurking in those same prehistoric oceans were creatures even bigger, even more savage, true leviathans that made even the fiercest predators look like bait. Enter Chronosaurus, a marine nightmare from the early Cretaceous that made even the largest crocodile look like a toy. This wasn't your average ocean predator, this was a giant pliosaur, a short-necked marine reptile with a terrifying skill set and the bulk to match. Chronosaurus didn't just swim through the seas, it owned them. How big was it? Try wrapping your head around this. The largest skulls reached 8 feet long, basically the size of a small car, meaning it could easily gulp down prey bigger than a full-grown human. From snout to tail, Chronosaurus measured 33 feet and weighed in at over 24,000 pounds. That's more than a full-size city bus. While its body shape resembled a modern orca, this creature was thousands of pounds heavier and just as agile. Its long, narrow head and short, muscular neck gave it rapid snapping ability, while its compact, torpedo-like body and 4 powerful flippers let it twist and lunge with surprising speed. Its tail, short but useful, helping it steer and pivot mid-chase like a cold-blooded torpedo. When it came to food, Chronosaurus wasn't picky. It likely devoured anything that moved, from fish and shelled mollusks to other marine reptiles, and it hunted smart. Depending on the size of the prey, it switched up its tactics. Smaller prey? No problem. It was grabbed, crushed, torn to shreds and swallowed whole. The shape of its teeth backs this up. Unlike other pliosaurs, Chronosaurus didn't have serrated or 3-faceted teeth. Instead, it had thick, cone-shaped fangs, perfect for piercing and gripping, not slicing. For larger prey, Chronosaurus likely used the death roll strategy, something like what today's crocodiles do. It would clamp down, twist, and rip chunks of flesh from its struggling victim. One moment you're swimming peacefully, the next, you're in the jaws of a sea monster that even time itself forgot. While they weren't the deadliest jaws in the ocean, Chronosaurus's teeth were no joke. Some specimens had fangs that measured up to 11.8 inches long, including a 4-inch crown that looked eerily similar to a crocodile's. When going after larger prey, this marine titan probably used a strategy straight from the modern crocodile playbook. Lock on, bite down hard, and twist violently, ripping off chunks of flesh in a brutal, spinning death grip. For most creatures that spotted Chronosaurus lurking in the distance, it meant one thing: a swift and terrifying end. But massive size didn't always mean lethal power. Roll the clock back over 100 million years before Chronosaurus ever swam, back to the Triassic period, and you'd find another enormous reptile cruising ancient seas. It wasn't as dangerous, but it had a mystery and uniqueness all its own. Meet Cymbospondylus, a bizarre-looking giant among early marine reptiles. This prehistoric swimmer was an ichthyosaur, a fish-like reptile that looked like a cross between a dolphin, a crocodile, and something out of science fiction. It had a tall, vertical tail fin, a massive head, and an elongated, narrow snout built for slicing through water. Its body was long and sleek, and almost half its length was tail, giving it incredible flexibility and balance as it swam. Instead of limbs, Cymbospondylus had flippers, though they weren't built for propulsion. Most of its movement came from its powerful side-to-side tail motions, like an eel on steroids. By Triassic standards, Cymbospondylus was huge, measuring anywhere from 20 to 33 feet long, making it one of the largest creatures of its time. But here's the twist: it wasn't much of a threat. Despite its size, it didn't have the jaw strength or teeth to take down large animals. Its teeth were too small and too blunt to do serious damage. So instead of picking fights with other marine reptiles, it likely spent its life in deeper waters, diving to hunt for soft-bodied prey like squid and fish. It may have only returned to shallower areas to mate or feed seasonally. Still, being big doesn't mean you're safe. Even this ocean giant had predators to worry about. One of them may have been its own cousin, a smaller but far more dangerous ichthyosaur that lived in the same age and region. Say hello to Latawakan. Although it was just a bit shorter, clocking in around 28 feet, Latawakan was a true hunter. It was one of the largest predatory ichthyosaurs ever discovered, and unlike Cymbospondylus, its teeth and build were optimized for killing. Fast, fierce, and fearless, this beast likely dominated its underwater world, going after anything it could overpower, including rival ichthyosaurs. Unlike its deep-diving cousin Cymbospondylus, Latawakan was built like a weapon. This fearsome ichthyosaur had a massive skull, almost twice as large in proportion to its body compared to most of its relatives. And its teeth? These weren't just for show, they were broad, razor-edged, and nearly 5 inches long. With dual cutting edges, they were perfectly engineered to tear into big prey, including creatures close to its own size. Latawakan wasn't just a predator, it was one of the first true marine super-predators, a creature that could turn the tide of an entire ecosystem. Much like today's killer whales, scientists believe it held a keystone role in its environment. It likely kept other species in check, balancing populations and controlling the flow of the food chain. It could hunt just about anything, even other large predators, earning it the title of apex predator in the prehistoric oceans it ruled. Evolution gave Latawakan the perfect toolkit: power, size, speed, and jaws built for dominance. But nature doesn't always follow a predictable script. Sometimes evolution takes a wildly creative turn and produces something strange, unexpected, and brilliant. Cue Styxosaurus, a creature so unique it seems pulled straight from the pages of science fiction. This marine reptile belonged to the Elasmosauridae family and lived about 80 million years ago during the late Cretaceous. But what made it truly unforgettable was its design. When you imagine seeing it in the ocean, the first thing you'd notice wouldn't be its bulky body, it would be its head, breaking the surface, attached to an absurdly long neck that made up nearly half of its 40-foot body. Picture a sleek, torpedo-shaped body gliding below with a slender neck snaking up from the deep like a periscope. Despite being big and strong, Styxosaurus didn't rely on brute force to catch its meals. Instead, it used its neck like a stealthy spear. That long reach allowed it to strike into schools of fish with speed and precision, lightning-fast ambushes from below while keeping its large body hidden in the darker waters. One popular theory suggests Styxosaurus and its relatives were masters of the ambush. Hovering below their prey, they'd thrust their tiny heads upward with explosive force, a nearly invisible strike in the murky sea. Its jaws were lined with thin, needle-like teeth, tightly interlocking when shut. Once it clamped down, there was no escape. These teeth weren't meant for chewing or slicing, they were strictly for gripping slippery, wriggling prey. That meant one thing: Styxosaurus had to swallow its meals whole, fish and all, and while its neck was incredibly long, almost comically so, it wasn't even the record holder for longest neck among marine reptiles. That title belongs to another elasmosaur we'll meet later. But even without the crown, Styxosaurus carved out a spot in history as one of the most bizarre and fascinating marine hunters to ever cruise the ancient seas. While Styxosaurus was patrolling the ancient oceans, another remarkable predator was gliding through the waters of what is now Canada, a creature that holds a record no other animal has broken to this day. Meet Albertonectes, the proud owner of the longest neck of any vertebrate ever to live. This extinct marine reptile, part of the Elasmosauridae family like Styxosaurus, didn't just turn heads with its neck, it was the neck. Its cervical spine alone, made up of a jaw-dropping 76 vertebrae, stretched out to 23 feet. That's longer than most school buses, and when you added the rest of its body into the equation, Albertonectes measured in at nearly 39 feet long from nose to tail. That's a swimming skyscraper in prehistoric terms. These kinds of massive ocean creatures weren't rare back then. They were the norm. For hundreds of millions of years, the oceans have been Earth's ultimate arena for size, power, and evolutionary creativity. Even today, the ocean still stuns us. Just look at the blue whale, the biggest creature to ever exist on this planet. Or consider the record-setting jellyfish, Cyanea arctica. Its bell can grow over 7 feet across, and its trailing tentacles can stretch up to 120 feet. That's longer than a blue whale, a semi-truck, and a city bus combined. But there's a catch with soft-bodied creatures like jellyfish, and octopuses too. They don't fossilize well. That means If legendary sea monsters like the kraken truly did roam Earth's oceans, we may never find hard fossil evidence to prove they were real. Still, some of the ancient ocean's top predators did leave behind their skeletons, and among them was a beast so fast, so deadly, it's become one of the most famous marine reptiles in prehistory. Enter Tylosaurus proriger, a terrifying member of the Mosasaurus family, a group of massive, extinct marine reptiles that were the true kings of the Cretaceous seas. Tylosaurus wasn't just big, it was enormous. It could grow up to 46 feet long, weigh around 18,800 pounds, and hunt with the speed and precision of a torpedo. But don't let its bulk fool you. This wasn't some sluggish sea cow. Tylosaurus had a sleek, aerodynamic body, and nearly half of its length was tail, which acted like a powerful rudder. This design let it slice through the water with alarming speed, capable of taking down even other large predators. It didn't matter if it was day or night. Tylosaurus could hunt in the dark, strike with accuracy, and vanish just as quickly. Its skull was surprisingly light and kinetic, designed to open wide and swallow big prey whole. And paleontologists have proof of that. In the fossilized stomach of a smaller species, Tylosaurus nepalicus, scientists found the teeth of Tychidus mortuni, a massive hybridon shark that could grow over 30 feet long. As if that weren't enough, the remains of another mosasaur, Platecarpus planifrons, around 14 feet long, were also found inside. This proves one thing: Tylosaurus didn't just rule the seas, it devoured the competition. Tylosaurus didn't care what was on the menu. If it swam, it was fair game. From small sea creatures to massive predators, even other mosasaurs, nothing was off limits. This ancient marine reptile was the definition of an apex predator. Its skull alone measured 4 to 5 feet long, giving it the power to bite off massive chunks of prey or simply swallow them whole, much like a supersized version of today's monitor lizards. We've got jaw-dropping evidence of just how ruthless it was. Not long ago, paleontologists discovered something truly wild: the fossilized remains of a Dolichorhynchops, a short-necked plesiosaur about 8 feet long, tucked neatly inside the stomach of a 29-foot-long Tylosaurus. That means this beast managed to swallow an 8-foot reptile in one gulp. Bones were crushed during the meal, but surprisingly, there were no tooth marks, a sign that it probably gulped the creature down alive. Tylosaurus's teeth were built for the job. These weren't knife-like or serrated like a shark's. Instead, they were thick, incredibly durable, and shaped just right. Flat on the inside, rounded on the outside, perfect for grabbing and holding onto slippery, wriggling prey. It was the perfect predator design, deadly efficient, with no escape for anything caught in its jaws. And it didn't just rule the open waters. If a terrified victim tried to escape into the pitch-black deep, thinking it might vanish into the shadows, Tylosaurus could still track it down. Scientists believe it may have had clusters of sensitive nerve endings, or even electroreceptors at the tip of its snout, called the rostrum. This gave it a kind of sixth sense, allowing it to detect faint movements or electric signals from hiding prey. There's even fossil evidence showing some Tylosaurus skulls had broken snouts that healed over time, forming bony growths. These injuries may have come from slamming into rocks, headbutting prey, or battling rivals. That's right. This wasn't just a hunter, it was a fighter too. Many Tylosaurus fossils show signs of brutal injuries, not just from other predators, but from members of their own species. These sea monsters were so aggressive that intraspecies combat, literal battles between individuals, was common. Instead of picking off easy targets, they often went after each other. Fights were violent, bloody, and often ended in cannibalism. Few made it to old age. Now imagine this thing swimming next to today's great white shark. The great white might be scary, but next to a fully grown Tylosaurus, it'd look like bait. At a towering 47 feet in length, the Tylosaurus was 3 times longer and 8 times heavier. Its 5-foot-long jaws were almost the same length as the entire body of a great white shark. If it wanted to, Tylosaurus could bite a great white clean in half, and probably wouldn't think twice about doing it. Tylosaurus was definitely one of the top predators cruising the ancient Western Interior Seaway, but it wasn't the king of those prehistoric waters. That title probably belongs to one of its close relatives, the monstrous Mosasaurus hoffmani. This giant was a serious contender for the biggest marine reptile to ever swim the earth. Picture a beast that could make even the toughest sea creatures shake in their scales. Mosasaurus hoffmani was related to today's monitor lizards, but instead of sticking to land, these guys took over the oceans, and they absolutely dominated there. This species is actually the type species of the Mosasaurus genus, falling under the Mosasaurinae subfamily within the bigger Mosasauridae family. Among dozens of mosasaurs, M. hoffmanii stood out for its jaw-dropping size and jaw-droppingly powerful build. This wasn't just some giant lizard, it was the ultimate evolutionary marvel within its family, a perfectly balanced killing machine of the sea. Some fossils tell the story better than words. For instance, a lower jawbone found in Russia's Penza region measured an incredible 5.5 feet long. Other jaw fragments hint at even larger sizes, up to 6.5 feet. Scientists estimate that Mosasaurus hoffmanii average between 50 and 56 feet in length, though some argue it might have been as small as 43 feet or as colossal as over 56 feet long. No matter the exact number, this creature was by far the largest marine predator of its time, possibly even the biggest of the entire Cretaceous period. When it came to weight, estimates range from a staggering 33,000 to 60,000 pounds. To put that into perspective, this sea monster could have been the largest carnivorous marine reptile among all the apex predators of its era. Compare it to today's great white shark, and the difference is jaw-dropping. Mosasaurus was 4 times longer and weighed more than 20 times as much. Its skull was a marvel of power and design.
Unlike Tylosaurus,
whose jaws were highly flexible and mobile, Mosasaurus had a different game plan. Its jaws were less about flexibility and more about brute force. They likely moved in a strong back-and-forth sawing motion to tear through flesh. Those teeth? They were deep-rooted and built to last, with crowns that were powerful and slightly flattened on the sides. Sharp cutting edges made them perfect for crushing and slicing through tough prey. And with jaws nearly as long as an average person is tall, this predator didn't just rip its prey apart. It could swallow huge chunks, or sometimes the whole meal, in one terrifying gulp. Unlike some predators that rely heavily on their sense of smell, like the hammerhead shark, which can detect just a few drops of blood from miles away, this underwater behemoth depended mainly on its sharp eyesight to hunt. Its massive eye sockets were built to capture as much light as possible, giving it impressive vision that could reach far across the murky depths. But there was a catch. Its binocular vision was pretty limited, only covering about 29 degrees. So while it could see far, it wasn't great at judging exact distances. But honestly, it didn't really need to. Scientists think Mosasaurus hoffmani's surprisingly weak sense of smell wasn't a disadvantage at all. It was a reflection of its top-tier status as a hyper-predator. When you're at the very top of the food chain, feeding fresh on live prey, there's no need to scavenge or sniff out carrion, so a powerful nose just wasn't necessary. Why waste energy tracking down wounded or dead animals when evolution has already armed you with everything you need to be the ocean's ultimate hunter? This giant's mission was simple: spot the prey, then take it down, and it was built for speed and agility. Its long, streamlined body, powerful flippers, and a sharp, shark-like tail fin allowed it to swim fast and maneuver with surprising skill, probably rivaling its cousin, the Tylosaurus, in underwater acrobatics. Mosasaurus, hoffmani, was no lazy hunter. It was an active apex predator, going after everything from massive fish and sharks to giant turtles, and yes, even other mosasaurs. Just like Tylosaurus, they were known to battle fiercely amongst themselves, often ending with the winner devouring the loser.
Experts believe this predator
Was just as comfortable launching surprise attacks from the deep as it was chasing prey in long, exhausting pursuits. Its stamina was top-notch, and its speed was nothing to sneeze at. The mosasaur wasn't some lazy drifter in the water. It was a powerhouse propelling itself forward with strong, sweeping strokes of its muscular tail. This wasn't a cold-blooded, sluggish reptile either. It was likely warm-blooded, with a high-octane metabolism that kept it active and constantly on the move, hunting with relentless energy. And it didn't just chase prey, it outsmarted it. This marine monster could drown air-breathing sea creatures by forcing them underwater, waiting patiently for them to run out of breath. It wasn't afraid to go deep either, diving into the dark zones of the ocean in pursuit of anything unlucky enough to catch its eye. What made this predator truly terrifying, though, was its ambition. It didn't care about the size of its prey. Big or small, it attacked anything that swam, including the largest sea turtle to ever exist on Earth. Meet Archelon, a prehistoric tank disguised as a turtle. This beast weighed in at around 4,800 pounds, about the same as a modern SUV, and stretched 15 feet from nose to tail. It belonged to the extinct Protostegydae family and roamed the Cretaceous seas, closely related to today's leatherback turtles. Everything about Archelon screamed defense. Its flippers spanned an incredible 16.5 feet, making it a powerful swimmer. On land, its massive limbs left tracks the size of bulldozer prints. Its skull alone measured over 2 feet, and it boasted a fearsome, hooked beak, like a hawk's, perfect for crunching through the shells of mollusks. Its thick, rugged shell made it nearly untouchable to most predators. Trying to bite or ram through that armor would have been like headbutting a concrete wall, especially for attackers like Tylosaurus, who relied on brute force. Most predators wouldn't even try. But Mosasaurus hoffmani wasn't most predators. Despite Archelon's sheer size and nearly impenetrable defenses, it still found itself on the mosasaur's menu. When this apex predator targeted you, no size, shell, or strategy was enough to save you. Fossils of ancient turtles like Archelon have been discovered with broken bones and missing flippers, evidence of violent attacks during their lifetime. Paleontologists believe these injuries were inflicted by massive predators like M. hoffmani.
in the ancient oceans.
Mosasaurus hoffmani wasn't just another hunter, it was the undisputed ruler of the deep, a predator whose size, strength, and savagery left nothing out of reach. Still, when it comes to raw bite force, even the mighty mosasaurs had to bow to a different kind of monster that shared the same waters of the Western Interior Seaway. Enter Dinosaurus, the prehistoric king of crocodiles and the undisputed champion of crushing power. This colossal predator wasn't just limited to the water, it was a dual-terrain terror, dominating both sea and shorelines. Dinosaurus was the largest crocodilian to ever live and made its home along the coastal edges of the Western Interior Seaway, stretching across what's now North America. In fact, it was the second most fearsome predator in the region, right after the mosasaurs. But what set Dinosaurus apart wasn't just its size. It was the fact that this ancient croc looked strikingly like the modern-day crocodiles and alligators we know today. Evolution, it seems, nailed the design early on and never felt the need to upgrade. When you create a near-perfect killing machine, why mess with success? Dinosaurus was split into two main populations, one in the west and one in the east. Scientists debate whether they were two distinct species or just regional variants of the same one. The western group is often referred to as Dinosaurus rugosus, while the eastern is known as Dinosaurus riograndensis. And unlike modern crocs that stick mostly to fresh water, Dinosaurus probably thrived in both freshwater and saltwater environments. Now let's talk size, and it's jaw-dropping. The eastern variety averaged about 29 feet long and tipped the scales at over 4,400 pounds. That alone dwarfs any crocodile alive today. But the real titan was the Western Dinosaurus. This brute reached a staggering 40 feet in length and weighed in at over 17,600 pounds.
For comparison,
The largest crocodile living today, Lolong, a saltwater croc, was about 17 feet long and weighed 2,400 pounds. That makes Dinosaurus more than twice as long and over 7 times heavier. This wasn't some lurking ambush predator picking off fish. Dinosaurus went after dinosaurs. That's right, this ancient croc had the power, size, and armor to take on even large land-dwelling herbivores and carnivores that came too close to the water's edge. And when we say armor, we mean it. Dinosaurus was decked out in 4 rows of oversized, ultra-dense bony plates called osteoderms that ran along its back like reinforced tank plating. These weren't just for show, they served as near impenetrable protection, making it incredibly hard for any rival predator to inflict serious damage. Even if it came face to face with something big and toothy, Dinosaurus was built to survive and dominate. The snout of Dinosaurus looked a lot like today's Mississippi alligator or Cuban crocodile, broad, flat, and lined with massive, bone-crushing teeth. But unlike modern gators, this ancient beast was a dinosaur killer. Further back in its jaws, its teeth weren't sharp, but blunt and tough, perfect tools for crunching through bones. And it used them too. These teeth were made for business, crushing the limbs and ribs of dinosaurs like they were twigs. Its legs were surprisingly powerful for such a heavy animal. Unlike today's crocs that mostly belly crawl, Dinosaurus could hoist its massive frame up and move confidently on land. This wasn't just a water ambusher, it could roam the shorelines like a tank on legs. But let's talk about the real showstopper, its bite. Big individuals could snap their jaws shut with 10 times the force of a Tyrannosaurus rex. And that's saying something because T-Rex had the strongest bite of any land-dwelling dinosaur. Dinosaurus, though, it was on a different level.
according to scientific estimates,
A single bite from Dinosaurus could unleash 100,000 newtons of pressure. That's over 22,000 pounds of raw crushing power. That's enough to smash a car into scrap metal or crack a boulder in half. It didn't need to rip prey to shreds like some predators. It just crushed it. Bones, shells, muscle gone in one devastating chomp. Its jaws weren't just weapons, they were wrecking machines. Almost nothing stood a chance. It fed on anything that dared to come near the water. Dinosaurs, massive fish, and armored turtles. And while some turtles, like Archelon, were too large to handle even for Dinosaurus, most prey didn't stand a chance. Interestingly, there was a bit of a split in behavior between eastern and western populations of Dinosaurus. The eastern ones were smaller, still massive but not quite in the apex dinosaur killer category. They focused more on mid-sized animals, fish, turtles, and other coastal critters. But the Western Dinosaurus, whole different beast. These giants went after big game, and I mean big. They were known to ambush and take down full-grown dinosaurs with ease. Their size, bulk, aggression, and bite power gave them the confidence to go toe-to-toe with anything, even the top land predators of the time. And here's the wildest part. They hunted large tyrannosaurids. Yeah, you heard that right. Species like Plesiosaurus and Gorgosaurus, which were apex land predators themselves, stretching up to 30 feet long, sometimes found themselves on the menu. Picture this, a towering theropod stalking prey near the water's edge, only to be grabbed, dragged under, and crushed by a reptilian monster lying in wait. The battles between Dinosaurus and Tyrannosaurs along the shores of the Western Interior Seaway, pure prehistoric carnage. Clash of the Titans in the truest sense. Along the ancient coastlines of the Western Interior Seaway, Dinosaurus ruled the shores with terrifying authority. Anything that wandered too close to the water's edge, dinosaur, fish, or reptile, risked being snatched and crushed by its monstrous jaws. But while Dinosaurus was king of the shallows, it rarely ventured into deeper waters. That's where the real deep-sea giants took over. Predators like the mosasaurs patrolled the open sea, reigning supreme. But not every threat in these waters was massive or immediately obvious. If you were unfortunate enough to fall into the ocean back then, chances are the first predator you'd come face to face with wasn't a giant reptile, it was a shark. And if that shark happened to be Tristychius, well, congratulations, you just got lucky.
This shark may have been huge, about 33 feet long,
Roughly the size of a modern whale shark, but don't let that freak you out. Tristychius was one of the least aggressive creatures in that ecosystem. It didn't chase after fast-moving prey or tear things apart with razor-sharp teeth. In fact, what made this shark stand out was its weird, almost gentle feeding habits. Paleontologists figured this out by studying its teeth, and what they found was pretty surprising. Instead of rows of sharp, triangular teeth like a modern great white, Tristychius had hundreds of flat, crushing teeth arranged in wide dental plates. Some of those plates were massive, up to 21 inches long and 18 inches wide. That's like having dinner plates for teeth. This shark wasn't built for tearing into flesh, it was a shell crusher. Its 550 teeth, including around 220 on the lower jaw and 260 on the upper, were ideal for breaking down hard-shelled creatures. These weren't random teeth either. They came in all shapes, some rectangular, others rounded or trapezoid-shaped. The tops of the teeth were lined with ridges, designed to add pressure and help grip slippery shells. Tristychius was part of a group of sharks known as Borophagus, which were specialized feeders. Their go-to menu included shelled animals, armored fish, and any sea life with a tough exterior. Mollusks were their bread and butter, and luckily for them, the oceans during the late Cretaceous were absolutely crawling with them. In fact, these sharks were so successful that up to 26 different species of Tristychius have been identified so far. They were everywhere, thriving in nearly every corner of the Cretaceous seas thanks to the endless buffet of shelled sea creatures. So, while you were definitely in danger swimming in the Western Interior Seaway, running into Tristychius was more of a mild inconvenience than a death sentence. Just stay away from anything with rows of dagger-like teeth or that looks big enough to bite a car in half, and you might just make it out alive. Now, if you happen to stumble across a different kind of shark in the waters of the Western Interior Seaway, then yeah, you had every reason to panic. Meet Squalicorax, and trust me, this wasn't your average sea predator. This shark didn't just compete with other monsters of the deep, sometimes it even went after medium-sized mosasaurs, yes, the sea dragons themselves. Squalicorax, part of a now extinct group of sharks from the Anacrocidae family, earned a reputation as one of the fiercest hunters of the late Cretaceous. It didn't mind getting its fins dirty either. If a fresh kill wasn't around, it had no shame scavenging whatever it could sink its teeth into.
And speaking of teeth,
Squalicorax came equipped with sharp, jagged, saw-like teeth that were perfect for grabbing prey and not letting go. Its body was sleek and hydrodynamic, built for speed and efficiency in the water. Imagine a torpedo with razor teeth. Its skin, scientists believe, was likely armored in rough scales, kind of like natural chainmail. This helped reduce drag, while also offering protection in the cutthroat world of prehistoric oceans. While it wasn't the biggest threat out there, averaging about 16 feet long, smaller than giants like Mosasaurus, Squalicorax made up for it with strategy and speed. When food ran low, Squalicorax would brave the coastal shallows, creeping into waters ruled by the likes of Dinosaurus, the monstrous land croc. It was risky business, but there were rewards. Along the shores, these sharks would scavenge dinosaur carcasses, feasting on whatever washed up. But scavenging wasn't all it did. Squalicorax was one of the only known sea creatures capable of taking down pteranodons, those giant flying reptiles with wingspans as wide as a small aeroplane. The shark would track them as they skimmed low over the water, diving for fish. One wrong move from a pteranodon, and it became a mid-air snack. This also tells us something fascinating. Squalicorax probably had fantastic eyesight, essential for hunting agile, fast-moving prey from below. It was a predator built for precision and ambush, not brute strength. If we were to compare prehistoric sea monsters to modern animals, Mosasaurus might look like a supersized monitor lizard, Dinosaurus like a crocodile on steroids, but Squalicorax, it's basically the great white shark of the Cretaceous, just as cunning, just as deadly, and every bit as terrifying. And yet, just when you thought things couldn't get weirder or scarier, the seas had one more surprise in store. A creature so bizarre and haunting, it barely looked real. Enter the Plesiosaurs, a group of marine reptiles with some of the longest necks in the history of the animal kingdom. They swam in the same waters, gliding silently through the depths from the Triassic all the way to the Cretaceous. And trust me, they were nothing like anything you've ever seen before. Some of the most legendary sea creatures from prehistoric times weren't just huge, they were strange enough to inspire myths that still live on today. We're talking about the Plesiosaurs, the long-necked sea reptiles that once ruled the oceans. Among the most iconic members of this group was Hydrotherosaurus. It was right around the average size for a plesiosaur, about 25 to 26 feet long, weighing in at around 2,400 pounds. Then there was Mosasaurus, which pushed past 26 feet, and towering over them all, the massive elasmosaurus. Its neck alone stretched 23 feet. All in, it could grow up to 34 feet long. If that name sounds familiar, there's a good reason. Elasmosaurus is widely believed to be the original inspiration behind the legend of the Loch Ness Monster. That eerie silhouette of a long neck arching out of the water with a massive body lurking just beneath the surface, that was an everyday reality 80 million years ago. Despite their terrifying appearance, these creatures weren't tearing into giant prey like mosasaurs or Dinosaurus. Their diets were more modest. Fish, squid, and other small marine invertebrates were their go-to meals. But don't let that fool you into thinking they weren't dangerous in their own right. Elasmosaurus and its cousins were built like underwater submarines. Compact, streamlined bodies with paddle-like flippers, a short tail, and a tiny head perched at the end of a bizarrely long, narrow neck. It might sound like an awkward setup, but it was perfect for their sneak attack strategy. They weren't fast swimmers, and their small mouths meant they couldn't chomp on anything too large. But what they lacked in brute force, they made up for in deception. Plesiosaurs would glide slowly through the water, keeping their bulky bodies hidden in the shadows. They'd stretch their long necks forward, quietly slipping their heads toward unsuspecting fish. To the prey, it may have looked like just another fish swimming by, but by the time the fish realized the truth, it was already on the menu. Estimates say it could hit 37 miles per hour, and its streamlined shape suggests it could even leap out of the water, dolphin style. Some experts believe it may have even snatched flying reptiles like pterosaurs right out of the air as they skimmed the waves. Visually, Cephalopod looked something like a supersized tarpon megalops with a serious attitude problem. Its massive, gaping mouth was lined with sharp, spike-like teeth, and that lower jaw, bulldog strong, giving it the fearsome nickname, the bulldog fish. Its fins were long and narrow, built for swift acceleration. Even its pectoral fins were armed, each edged with a sharp, enamel-coated spine that could stretch nearly 3 feet long. Everything about Cephalopod screamed underwater death machine, fast, reckless, gluttonous, and deadly. If you were swimming in the Western Interior Seaway during the late Cretaceous and this beast spotted you, Your story ended there. By now, you've probably picked up on a clear pattern in the Western Interior Seaway. Everything was massive. Gigantism wasn't just a quirk out here, it was the rule. From turtles the size of SUVs to ancient squid-like creatures with shells as big as hot tubs, these waters were filled with monsters that seemed more at home in a sci-fi movie than Earth's past. And if you think you've seen it all, wait until you meet the ammonites. These weren't your average sea snails. Ammonites were a class of now extinct cephalopod mollusks, think cousins of modern squids and octopuses, that ruled the ancient seas. Their trademark was a coiled spiral shell that they carried like armor, and they were absolutely everywhere. Scientists have identified over 40,000 species of them across the globe, but one ammonite stood above the rest, literally. Its name, Parapuzosia. This thing was a behemoth among invertebrates. Its shell alone could reach over 11 feet in diameter, about the size of a compact car, and the full animal could weigh nearly 3,300 pounds, making it the heaviest invertebrate to ever live. If you were to stretch out its spiral shell, it would uncoil into a tunnel over 30 feet long. Let that sink in. Parapuzosia moved by filling the chambers of its shell with water or gas, using jet propulsion to glide through the ocean depths, just like modern squids. It had a hooked beak and long, muscular tentacles, perfect for grabbing prey in the water column. And it wasn't just a predator, it was also a floating reef. Its massive shell likely became a home to other marine life, much like barnacles and algae attached to whales or ship hulls today. Small fish, crustaceans, and filter feeders may have clung to it, creating an entire mini ecosystem riding on the back of this gentle giant. While smaller ammonites were frequently snacked on by mosasaurs, Parapuzosia was in a league of its own. Its shell was nearly unbreakable, and the creature inside, not defenseless, it could likely deliver a nasty bite to anything foolish enough to try. These deep-sea titans patrolled the vast underwater highway of the Western Interior Seaway, adding yet another layer of danger to a place already teeming with nightmares. It's hard to believe that a sea only 600 miles wide and 2,000 miles long could pack in so many leviathans. It was a place where monsters fought monsters, and only the most powerful survived. Looking back, it almost feels like evolution ran wild in these waters, like nature cranked up the settings and let its imagination run free. The result? Some of the most terrifying, jaw-dropping, and awe-inspiring creatures the planet has ever seen. So tell us, what shocked you the most? Was it the armored crocs, the bulldog fish, the 30-foot ammonites, or maybe you know of another prehistoric nightmare we didn't mention? Drop your thoughts in the comments. We'd love to hear about the ones that haunt your imagination. Thanks for diving deep with us into this lost world. If you enjoyed this journey through Earth's ancient monsters, be sure to subscribe, smash that like button, and stick around for more. Until next time, stay curious and never stop exploring.